Dr. Yivagus Falcha, hi, hello, and welcome. It's John O'Sullivan from the Irish Pagan School, and we are running down the clock on our 90-day challenge here in YouTube. And so, again, as ever, thank you very much for being part of this community and for joining us and kind of connecting with us on it. It's been really, really great. It's been really fantastic. So don't worry, we're not going to go anywhere. The plan is that Laura and I will still turn up in YouTube for a video each once a week, but we're also going to be popping a video over into our Patreon for the Irish Pagan School as well. And there we're going to try and be more responsive in some ways to kind of questions and answers there. So if you're interested, make sure you pop on over there, and also make sure you're on the mailing list, because as much as you might be seeing us pop up in your feed, if you've hit the bell for notifications, then you're getting the videos pop up whenever we launch them. But also we do have the mailing list as well, which helps kind of steer you towards the classes, the information, the other resources that we put out, because we do like to keep a lot of content going, keep a lot of kind of resources and connecting people with it, because the tagline, the motto for all of our school and everything is authentic connection to Ireland. So that being said, I've covered the notes and the awareness piece. I'm doing my video today, and my video today is a response. It's a question that we had drop into our comments here that I am really delighted to receive and really excited to answer. So I recorded a video on working with multiple deities and how it occurs from time to time that when you begin to work with one Irish deity, another Irish deity turns up and another Irish deity turns up. And what starts out as altar space for one particular deity soon has a corner dedicated to this god, a corner dedicated to that goddess, and next thing you know, you have like a special mug in the kitchen that you pour Dag the coffee for. So it's a common practice, and it is, again, as I mentioned, part of the closeness of the Irish pantheon of gods. So that kind of stimulated a question from Scott, and I'm going to read out the question because it's very well thought out, and I thought it really kind of touches on a number of different key points. So Scott mentioned there is like, given that pagans of all beliefs often gather and converse with each other, we bump into other pantheons. What is your experience when it comes to interacting with other pantheons? So of course that's the first question, but he goes on, which is really, really great. My friend was from the Norse pagan community, recently came to me and asked questions about the Morrigan, asking about her signs and her presence. Scott linked them to Laura's videos because they're excellent. Again, thank you for the compliments. It's what we really try and do, Scott. But I found it curious about how do different pantheons kind of commingle. It then carries on. I know the Romans, when they experienced the Celts, just attributed Celtic pantheons to their own deities instead of seeing them as independent, unique pantheons. But we definitely don't do this, as we recognize how separate pantheons for what they are. And that's how we think we should do it. Anyway, how should we approach this to not only other cultures, but just within the Celtic nations? Have you heard of anyone being called like this? So it's a really great question, and the answer is yes. The answer is very much yes. And I have come across so many people in my time who end up, following that stumble bumping into other pantheons. The first thing to really talk about is the fact that pagan, when we talk about pagan, we're not talking about one specific religious doctrine, one specific path or faith or kind of anything at all. Like, pagan is an umbrella term, so there are many different forms of spiritual practice, worship, faith, reverence, dogma, religions, all of which that fall under the umbrella term of paganism. The fact that it's referred to as pagan is more because it identifies all of these collections of religions, because they have a couple of fundamental things that are the same, in that it's belief in polytheism, which is a faith in multiple deities, acknowledgement of earth-based connectivity and ecological elements to the connectedness that we feel, and then also introspection and meditation forming a big part of all of these spiritual practices that helps to identify them as pagan. So yeah, like, you do find that paganism is not just one particular thing, and when pagans gather, you do bump elbows with other people who experience their spirituality in different ways, and again, other deities that work along with those individuals and those kind of faith structures. So really, what is your experience when it comes to interacting with other pantheons? I have bounced off other pantheons in my time. I really, really have. I have always been fascinated by them ever since I was a kid, kind of reading and beginning to explore mythology. I was that kid who could name all of the gods in the Greek pantheon and then the Roman equivalents in the Roman pantheon, because those were what was highlighted. Again, that's maybe the Latin language based influence of Christianity and Catholicism in Ireland, as well as then the Hebrew influences that set up the creation of Christianity as that kind of came down the way too. But I was always fascinated, even like the Egyptian religions. And so it was only later in life that I was able to overcome the kind of Catholic programming to a certain degree and realize that, hold on, Ireland had its own gods before Christianity came in. And that really blew my mind because I could name all of these other gods and all these other pantheons and all the rest of it, but I had no fucking clue about the ancient deities of my own country and my own culture. And that, again, made me sad, made me a little bit angry. I've ranted about this before in other places. And so, yeah, that kind of began that quest really to find out more about the Irish gods and where were they, which then, of course, led me down the road to meeting the Morrigan, meeting the Dagda. I've done videos on those before. And then, getting a god tattoo on my wrist because I work for the guy. So, yeah, I do come across people who have other pantheons, and through them, I gain insight perspective into their belief structures, their faith structures, and their gods. I have found it fascinating to kind of explore the lore as much as I can with the resources available to me of those other deities, of those other mythologies. And again, it's not always easy. And this kind of speaks to some of the questions later on. It's hard to kind of find original native resources because so many of the countries are colonized countries. So many of the countries have had their ancient traditions or their mythology kind of oppressed or eradicated, like as what happened in Ireland. All of those deities and the information about those deities was, like, if not ridiculed to obscurity, it was intentionally eradicated from living memory with the destruction and the laws against kind of druidry, for example. And then bards, they went after the bards as well in later medieval. There was one of the penal laws, which is like, yeah, you're not allowed to have a bard in your house, So what was part of the cultural narrative, I think I covered some of this in Being a Bard, but it's that position of a bard within the culture of ancient Irish society to be the function of memory, to remember all of the old stories, to remember the names of the old gods, and to carry that information forward. And so what was part of the even later medieval culture, you'd still have Irish bards roaming around, and they would be housed with nobles, they'd be housed with lords, and they would sing the ancient ballads. That became a crime, that became something that would get someone in trouble with the English and Norman oppressors at the point. Well, actually, the Normans kind of integrated a little bit, was the English oppression, Henry III, Edward, and then Henry VIII. So, yeah, anyway, back on track. Interacting with other pantheons, I have always bounced off other pantheons, and I absolutely find it fascinating. I still really, really do. But Julius Caesar, when he experienced all the Celtic nations, tried to rationalize these other deities against his own pantheon. So, he had this idea of Jupiter being this deus pater, this kind of sky father or thunder god. And then he was then looking for this caricature, these kind of elements in other pantheons, and that's how he was like, well, that's just Jupiter, that's how they know Jupiter. But he made too much of a step in there. But it does indicate that there is a lot of kind of, I'm going to go Jungian with it, a little archetypal circumstances, an archetypal father figure in a lot of kind of pantheons of spiritual worship. And I wrote a story called the Deus Pater Support Group, where I kind of took all of these father figures and kind of shoved them into the support group conversation where they're talking about their kids, So, Odin rocks on in, arriving late, and like he pulls up a chair, and around the table is like Veu, around the table is Yahweh, around like you have kind of Lu on one side, the Dagda over there, Hephaestus is there, and it's just that exploration of deity from multiple perspectives. Now, I will say, hands on table here, I am not an expert in other pantheons. I'm sticking very squarely within my wheelhouse as an Irish pagan. And even then, I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself who's learning a feckin' lot and will keep learning as long as I live, hopefully. but what I know I wanted to kind of express in that work of fiction that I wrote. And so that allowed me a way of kind of pulling together what I understood about these other deities, because I do read about them. I do read about other pantheons, and I do have personally felt interactions with other pantheons. But invariably, like it kind of bounces off me because there's this big hand on my shoulder going, he's with me, which is great because it means I get access to some places that, you know, might be dangerous for other people because I've got Dagda on my back. What are you going to do? That sounds a little bit big and of myself or egotistical. I didn't mean it to come across that way. It is just an understanding that, you know, I have devoted myself to a pretty substantive deity. Don't do well. Yeah, I'm a little bit irreverent. Laura is a reverend. Laura is a registered reverend in Ireland. Thank you to the pagan life rights community, which is brilliant. But I refer to myself as the irreverent. But that's again a joke, totally a joke for fun. So yeah, you mentioned here your Scott, as you kind of carried on there, the Norse pantheon, Norse pagan community. I had to read this part out because I find it hilarious, because I have known many people who follow Odin have bounced off the Morrigan, or followed Morrigan, become aware of Odin. And I have known some people who themselves has professed to, a work placement, a work placement with other deities, in that, you know, they're dedicated to one god, but the god is like, I need you to go and do a work placement with this god over here for a period of time, you know, to do something. Or it's almost like a work exchange program where some deities and other pantheons kind of swap over devotees for periods of either upskilling, training, experiencing, or to provide perspective and resources from a different angle into communities or into certain events, etc. But the Morrigan and Odin are two I find absolutely hilarious in my own experience of them. You know, I love the Morrigan. She's like right here. The altar to the Morrigan is right over my shoulder. I've talked about her before. She has my love and she has my respect. She doesn't have my service. But I think she's pretty cool with that. And I have experienced Odin in my own way and my presence of it. And the fact that both of them have this long perspective. Both of them has this really long view of things, with, you know, Odin sacrificing his eye to the well to gain perfect knowledge of everything, and the Morrigan being a goddess of prophecy. Again, that's the long view, the awareness of future things. And so them kind of having that long kind of view and having those long kind of machinations, like we know both of them are very much strategic in how they go about things. And so my visualization in so many times is like putting the Morrigan and Odin on opposite sides of, say, a vehicle board or a chessboard, and see how that plays out. I've written it in some of my fiction stories as well, the Dagda versus the Morrigan in chess. And I have actually mentioned, oh no, that doesn't exist. I've written a work of fiction called Deity 404. It doesn't exist right now. It's in early drafts, but I have like many words written, and it's about that exploration of multiple pantheons and multiple deities and how they interact and kind of communicate with each other. So back on point, yeah, the Morrigan, I have heard of Morrigan devotees being placed on work placement with Odin, or Odin devotees being placed on work placement with the Morrigan. And so it's not uncommon. But really, to bring it into that final question, how should we approach this to not only other cultures, but even just within Celtic nations? Have you heard of anyone being called? So yes, I have heard multiple people being called in this way, but I think the crucial important thing when approaching this, it has to be from, as much as I've talked about like the personal, like spiritual sensibility, spiritual sense and sensitivity, sensibility, and personal sovereignty. All right, I'm going to presume that you've watched those other videos. If you haven't, do go back into the playlist and find them, because that talks about setting yourself up for interacting with deity. So if you've done all of that kind of work and you are already down your path of connecting with deities, and you come across this option or this kind of work placement experience, the most important thing to do is to try wherever possible to go to native sources. You know, there's so much kind of content out there from different perspectives on things. It can be a little bit challenging to get back to a root, get back to like the original kind of content. And in some cases, it doesn't even exist. So you have to do the work. You got to dig around on it. And that's when we say at the Irish Pagan School, you got to do the work. You know, it's calling on people to invest in that relationship. It's calling on someone to really, don't just take the first answer. Don't just take the first book you read and then presume you know everything, you know, because if you're building this relationship, this kind of, again, core equivalence, this right relationship with a deity, you want to make sure you're informed for your own awareness, your own like sensibility, your own protection, but then also to make sure that you're able to align yourself with what you're being asked to do from that deity. So the how, it is about going back to native sources wherever possible. And I unfortunately don't have places that I wish I could point you to. This person in Wales is like, you know, an excellent native source. This person in you know, Scandinavia is a great source. I know some people, and we try our best to do as much as we can for Irish paganism here, but it is about approaching the cultures respectfully and appreciatively. Laura's done a video on appreciation versus appropriation. And that is the next step, which is very, very important to do. Because if you are moving into this right relationship, then you want to be positioning yourself from a respectful approach to appreciation, not a gainful approach to appropriation. Now, the difference is, what are you looking to get from this? Are you looking to develop your own spiritual growth, your own relationship? You know, are you giving back to that culture? Are you giving back to the native sources who are providing your, you know, the pathway for your own personal growth? Or are you trying to leverage knowledge or information out of those cultures to then position yourself either financially or like socially as some authority or some position? Because that's where, if you're not kind of keeping the right relationship with the culture from which the deities come from, then you are moving across that line into appropriation, because you're taking as opposed to having an exchange, you know. So we talk about that a lot, and it is something. Or a Welsh pagan school, you know, if they don't exist. We wanted an Irish pagan school. It didn't exist. It's what we needed, so we ended up having to fucking build it. Hopefully in the future there will be more places where we can have those greater resources, but until then, if you are working within another culture or another pantheon or another nation or ethnicity, it's important to give back to the roots there. One thing that we say, if you can't kind of, you know, give to the school, like that's fine. We don't expect everyone to, but you know, people ask us about offerings. How do I make offerings to Ireland? It's like, well, have you considered donating to Irish charities? And it doesn't even have to be money. Have you considered going into Dúchas.ie, the National Folklore Collection, and doing free transcription work? Because there's loads of information that isn't transcribed. And that can be an offering of effort to the native sources from which you are gaining your information, from which you are gaining this instruction, this guide, this pathway to your own spiritual growth. So again, not an easy question, but it's an awesome question. So many parts to it, and I'm really, really delighted to kind of get dug in and to answer it as best. And I really hope I have answered it as best I could for you, Scott, and for anyone else who's kind of come along to experience this video. So to wrap it all up and sum it all up, absolutely, you know, when pagans gather, you're going to bounce off other pagans with other faith paths, other kind of structures, other pantheons, and yeah, you may kind of get the rub off on some other deity who's like, oh, that's an interesting thing, you know. But it is important to be aware of yourself first, your own personal sovereignty. I've talked about that. But then also the information that you can access around that other deity, that other pantheon, and the native culture, practices, ethnicities that it stems from. And then as you move forward with that exploration, that religion, or that kind of growth of yourself, it is about doing it ethically. It's about doing it responsibly, and it's about doing it within a healthy exchange, so that you don't step across into that appropriation of just taking and leveraging for your own kind of whatever. Great question. Absolutely fantastic. Thank you very, very much for asking it, Scott. Sorry it took a while to come around to answering that, but I really, really hope I have done my best for it. And if other people have kind of watched this video and thought there was something about it you really liked or resonated with, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to catch more of these. As I said, we will be moving down to like only 2 videos a week, one Laura, one me. So you don't want to be missing out on those as they pop up. But do, if you really want more information, more resources, join us on the mailing list. And is there anything else I'm supposed to say to round it off? I don't think so. So what I will say is what I always say at the end is like, thank you very much. I'm really, really grateful you've taken time out of your day to be with me for these, few minutes. I don't do short videos. You know me at this point. When John sits down, it's going to be 20, 30 minutes. But if you are enjoying it, I'm really, really grateful. It makes it worthwhile for me to do this. And, remember, you are worth the effort. You are worthwhile, and you need to be looking after yourself, taking care of yourself, and because there is only ever you. So be the best one you can be. Be the best version of yourself you can be, and help everyone else out whenever you are strong enough to do so. So until next time, look after yourself, take care, and slán. Goodbye.